Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 276 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is your host, Jackson Mummy. I'm really glad you're with us. Welcome, and hope things are going well with your bar exam studies. As I am recording right now, we still don't have New York results. I have really missed, I thought they'd be out before now, so I'm going to just keep saying it. I expect them this week. Last year in 2018, the New York results were released on October 23rd. So it is reasonable to assume that in the week that this episode drops, we should have results. And in fact, by the time this episode is released on Wednesday morning, it's very likely that the results will be out. So good luck to everybody that was waiting for that exam. We're still waiting on lots of other states as well. Notable among those would be California and Georgia and Texas, but New York is the next big state coming up. So good luck there. I thought in today's episode, given that we're in this season of getting results in, that it would be helpful to focus on the group of people that are repeating their bar exam. And so the title of this episode is What Repeaters Need to Know to Pass the Bar. Now, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. What repeaters need to know is not more law. I recognize that that's the easy answer that people expect is just no more law, but it's really much more subtle and I think important than that. And so in this episode, I'm going to take you through three things that I think repeaters need to know. So I hope you'll stick around for that. And if you happen to be a first-time taker, well, I think it's useful information as well, just to understand what it's like if you don't pass the exam. So look forward to sharing that information in just a minute. Now, before we jump into today's message, I want to let you know that our episode this week, as always, is brought to you by our free online training. It's called Do Something Different. Make the next bar exam your last bar exam. And it's a great opportunity for you to see the steps that successful students have taken to move, in many cases, from failing results to passing results. You'll hear from them in their own words. You'll see step-by-step what occurs. The training is completely free. And best of all, in my mind, it's on demand. You can choose the day and time that work best for you to watch and participate. And all you have to do is register in the show notes. Now, the show notes can be found in a couple of different places. If you're watching this week's episode on video, and to do that, you would go to celebrationbarreview.com/276. Or if you're listening in audio on Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio or radio.com or Spotify or I don't know, plenty of different places that were syndicated, you'll see a button on either or any of those show notes where you can register. It's completely free, and then you can jump right in and get this information. And it is literally the kind of information that can change your life when it comes to passing the bar exam. So I really encourage you to check it out if you haven't been through that particular training. Well, I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. Do want to let you know that we will keep you informed as results come out in these big jurisdictions. We're getting close to the little more than halfway point in the exam results season. And at this point, if you've gotten your results, you should be, and they weren't favorable, you should be studying for the February 2020 exam, as you're going to hear in a moment. So we want to keep you on track and informed there. And I think today's message is really going to give you a focal point, particularly if you're a bar repeater. So let's jump into it. Well, today we're going to talk about three things that you need to know if you're repeating the bar exam. And here's a spoiler alert. Knowing the law is not one of those three things. Now, I want to be clear, you still have to know the law, but that's really not our focus today. I'm going to assume that you actually do know the law, and that's not the problem. But instead, you're caught up in a vortex, a little bit like the background behind me today. And it seems like it's a spiral that just draws you in and further down and further away. And so I want to give you some clear directions and roadmap for three things that I think you have to know in order to get out of that vortex, in order to pass and make the next bar exam your last bar exam. Let's go ahead and jump right into the very first one. And it's going to be staggering. And I think some of you are going to be really surprised by this. But I think the first thing is you have to know the odds. You have to know the numbers when it comes to being a bar repeater. Now, the National Conference of Bar Examiners every year produces a set of statistics. We're going to link to them from this video. And these statistics are the only accurate, valid numbers across all 50 jurisdictions as to first-time takers, pass rates, repeat bar takers, and their pass rates. Now, I know that there are bar review companies that publish pass rates and say that they know exactly what the rates are. That is absolutely untrue. And the reality is the only set of numbers comes a full year later from the NCBE, and that is literally the statistics that I'm using here. What I've also discovered over the years is that most bar repeaters have absolutely no idea what these statistics are, and the numbers have gotten dramatically worse. Now, as I'm recording this today, the latest set of statistics are for the complete year of 2018. And I want to make one other point about these numbers. There are some jurisdictions, like Florida, that never publish their repeat bar taker rates themselves. They never give them out. The only way those numbers are known is when this study comes out from the NCBE. So again, when you start hearing bar review companies or providers telling you that they have pass rates, that's impossible. They don't have pass rates because they're not published and produced on an ongoing basis. All right, now, having said that, I want to highlight a few states and just give you the overall statistics for repeat bar takers. Now, this is not the first-time bar taker rate. That's the number you hear about in the media. It's the number that gets published. It's the number in the press releases, and it has no bearing on you if you're a repeat bar taker. So here are a few states I think you should be aware of. First, the granddaddy of them all, California. The total number of repeaters in taking the bar exam in 2018 in California was over 6,000 people. The number of passing, about 1,200. That resulted in a pass rate for repeat bar takers of 20%, 2-0. So 2 out of every 10 repeaters in California passed the bar exam. Okay, that's pretty staggering. How about Florida, the state that I just mentioned? Well, in 2018, there were 1,300 plus repeat bar takers. Only 299 of them passed. That was a 22% pass rate. All right, you're not loving this, I'm sure. How about Georgia? The total number of repeat bar takers was 620. 155 of those passed, so a 25% pass rate in that jurisdiction. Another big jurisdiction, the second largest actually, is New York. And in New York, the numbers are also pretty staggering. In New York, there were 4,300 repeat takers in 2018. Fewer than 1,000 of them passed. The pass rate was 23%. Gets your attention, doesn't it? How about Texas, another big state when it comes to the bar exam? In Texas, we had about 1,200 repeat bar takers in 2018. 371 of them passed for a slightly better pass rate of 31%. So here's what we've got so far. From 20% up to 31% for these major jurisdictions. Now, these are the big states in which you've got a lot of people taking the exam. How about some of the smaller states that people typically go to, UBE states? Well, Alabama had a pass rate for repeat bar takers of 14%, 1-4. That was the lowest that I could find in the country, and that's a pretty stunning number when you think about it. Some other states, Colorado had a 32% pass rate. Connecticut had a 22% pass rate. Kentucky, they were pretty good. They had a 40% pass rate. The District of Columbia had a 37% pass rate. In Illinois, it was a 36% pass rate, but they've switched to the UBE, so we don't know what's going to happen there. New Mexico, one of the states we really like students to go to, and we've had great success. I guess it showed they had a 43% pass rate there for repeat bar takers. Minnesota has a 39% repeat bar taker pass rate. New Jersey, obviously a fairly big state, had 500 repeat takers, 125 passed for a 25% pass rate. North Carolina recently switched to the UBE. Their repeat bar taker pass rate was 22%. And the list goes on and on and on. I'll add South Carolina. That's another state we hear a lot about. 175 repeat takers, 50 of them passed, 30% pass rate. And then Tennessee, a state that just switched to the UBE. In Tennessee, when it was still the Tennessee exam in 2018, had a 21% repeat taker pass rate. As I said, we'll link to this report so that you can look at it and check out your own jurisdiction. But I think it's important at the beginning to recognize that those odds are certainly against you. I think repeat bar takers live sometimes under the misapprehension or the delusion that, oh, they're going to pass. And they see that because they read the statistics that say some percentage of people pass in the first 4 tries on the exam. And that number is true as to the overall, but the reality is if you're in one of these big states and you're repeating the bar exam, you've got a very slim chance of passing. And that's not to discourage you, and that's not to say you shouldn't try, quite the opposite. But it does mean that you need to understand what the odds are against you. And so if your plan on repeating the bar exam is to just do the same thing, or to not put any additional effort in, or to not change what you're doing, or to just coast along and hope that the results change, these numbers ought to be a wake-up call to you. They ought to be a pretty clear indication that that doesn't work very well, and that you're going to have to put a lot of effort into being successful. Now, the other reason that I tell you these numbers is because I think effectively they act as quotas on the system. You know, we hear all about the first-time bar taker pass rates, and those numbers have been going steadily down for nearly 10 years now, and they're very discouraging numbers. It's great when you're a first-time taker, though, that you've got a better than 50% chance in some jurisdictions, although in some other states, like California, you don't even get that. But the reality is that there is a quota, there is a limit on the number of new attorneys coming into states. And whether the bar examiners have explicitly identified a quota in their own minds or not, effectively we're seeing a repeat of these patterns. If you're a repeat bar taker, there is a 20% pass rate in Florida. That's just what happens, and it goes exam after exam. Doesn't matter if you're in the July test or the February test, same result. And we see that over and over again. So don't be delusional about this. Don't be misled into thinking that, well, I came close, so I'm not really a repeat bar taker, or I didn't really try the first time, so I'm not really a repeat bar taker, or something happened to me that was outrageous in my personal life or family life or work life right before the exam, and so I'm not really a repeat bar taker. Oh, yes, you are. You're a repeat bar taker. You get put into the same set of statistics, and the statistics don't lie, and they make it very clear that you've got a big, big job ahead of you. All right, well, if you're still watching or listening, congratulations. It means you're tough. You're not willing to give up. Now, there will be some people that literally just gave up. As I gave those numbers, they will say, forget it, I can't do it. And that's a shame. You shouldn't feel that way. But the reality is, if you're still here, let's move on and talk about two other things you need to know. The second item is you need to know your competition. You need to know who it is you're really competing against. And it goes to this first idea of repeaters versus first-time takers. Once you've taken the bar and failed, you are no longer competing against that first-time bar cohort. Not easy to say. Those group of people have their own pass rate. And I believe quite strongly, based on the statistics and my experience in over 30 years, that the bar examiners are looking at repeaters in a slightly different light. It's not that your bar exam package is separated out. It's simply that when it comes time to make a decision about pass or fail and looking at the numbers and regrading, there's just a certain number of people that are going to get through. And the examiners know effectively what that first time pass rate will be, and they know how many people are going to come through. And so in effect, I think you're actually competing not against first-time takers, but against other repeaters. Now, the point of that is that if you've been thinking, well, I should sit for the February exam because it's easier, or the July exam because it's easier, and I hear both, the answer is don't. That's not at all what's going on. It has nothing to do with that. You are always competing against the repeat bar taker group. Those are the people that represent your competition. Don't worry about the first-time takers anymore. They're not part of the group that you're worried about or that you should be trying to beat, as it were, on the exam. Now, I think when you think about the competition for repeaters, it's an interesting way to start sorting people out. For example, there are other people who are repeating the exam who are also repeating their process. They're doing exactly what they did first time or second time or third time or fourth time or 10th time through. They're memorizing the law. They're creating flashcards. They're using IRAC issue spotting writing. They're trying to analyze the answers on the multiple choice. They're doing the traditional things in the traditional way. Now, I've also seen that as people repeat more and more and more times, it's like a glide slope. They do less and less and less as they go along. And the percentages of people who pass, given the number of times they've taken the exam, also decrease. That is, if you had a 20% chance of passing on your second try, in reality, if you're on your third try, that number is something less than 20%, even lower when you get to your fourth try, and so on. But there are those people that simply continue to do the same thing. If you're one of those, I can pretty much assure you that you will not pass the exam. If you already failed using the traditional bar review approach of recite, memorize, cram, then the statistics tell us that you're going to continue to be unsuccessful. The other group that I think you have to know about in terms of competitors is The people you're competing against, the other repeat bar takers, when did they start their studies? Now, this is significant in my mind because there is a very real problem here. If you took the Florida bar exam in July, you got your results in the middle of September. If you took the California bar exam in July, you got your results at the end of November. Both groups are taking the multi-state bar exam and they're being put on a national scale. Well, guess who got the head start? The folks in Florida. What that means is that if you're a California bar taker, you may want to decide to not sit for the next administration of the exam after you get your results. That is, if you got your results in November from the July exam, you may decide, you know what, I just don't think I can be ready in February. And that's not a bad decision. Sometimes it makes more sense in that circumstance to sit out an exam and circle back around. And the reason I say this is that you are competing against people who in effect have a head start. Now, let's say that you're in a jurisdiction like Florida that released their exam results relatively early. And you got your results, as I said, in mid-September. But here we are in the end of October, and you're still agonizing and beating yourself up and feeling bad about what happened. Well, during those last 4, 5, 6 weeks or more, the people that you're competing against have been studying. And when I mean the people you're competing against, I mean the people who are going to be successful on the exam. And so you have to get back in the game as soon as possible. Now, this is true no matter what jurisdiction you're in. If you want to sit for the very next exam, you don't have the luxury of waiting very long after you get your results. Is it miserable when you find out you failed? Absolutely. Is it a terrible time? Absolutely. Do you have the luxury of wallowing in your despair? Unfortunately, you don't. You have to get back in and get going right away. An early start makes a difference here. And if you don't think you can be ready, if you can't put in our course, we think about 250 to 300 hours, you simply won't be ready. Now, I say that 250 to 300 hours number very deliberately, because if you're getting results in Georgia or California or a jurisdiction that releases in the month of November, you might say, well, what chance do I have? Well, it depends on how many hours you can put in. If you can put in 300 hours between your exam date and the date you got your results previously, then you'll be okay. Even though I think you're at something of a disadvantage when it comes to the multi-state, where everyone in the nation is compared against each other. So, interesting problem, something we certainly would be happy to talk with you about in your individual circumstance. Something else I think you have to know about your competition is, what approach are they taking to the exam? I said earlier, if they're just repeating the same old process, but you know, most of the people that take the exam, at least the first time, use one variant or another of the same basic model. They memorize, they recite, they cram, they use issue spotting on their essays, they try to analyze and figure out wrong answers and eliminate them on the NCBE. They use the same basic approach to almost everything they do. That works for some people. If it didn't work for you and you're a repeat bar taker, I think it's important to understand that if you continue to use tools like issue spotting and IRAC writing, if you do the same things, you are going to be in with that same group of people who are going to continue to fail. And therefore, one of the things you want to do is stand out. You want to take and do something different. Now, that's the name of our free training webinar that we provide, called Do Something Different, because it is the essence of what causes people to go from the failing side of the ledger to the passing side of the ledger. They change what they do. They change the way they study. They change the way they write. They change the way that they answer questions. And in that process of changing, they move away from the pack of repeat bar takers and they use better tools. Now, we talk a lot in Celebration Bar Review about a variety of tools. We have some things called PhotoReading and Paraliminals. We use audio meditation. We use a different style of writing, a proprietary style of writing. We have an approach to answering multiple choice questions that we call selective intuition. In fact, we trademarked that name. There are a lot of different things that we do differently, not just for the sake of doing them differently, but because we've seen over a long period of time that those tools are effective in helping people who had failed in the traditional approach get into the passing side of the score. And so those are the tools I think you have to use if you want to get away from your competition. If you want to keep competing with the people that fail over and over again, then don't change anything. That's simple. But if you want to be outside that group, if you want to be one of the 20 or 25% that passes as a repeat bar taker, I think it's absolutely vital that you separate yourself from what most of those people are doing and demonstrate and use better tools. And we're glad to talk with you about any and all of those tools. I think there are a lot of things you can do, as well as just getting better coaching. And so I think that's part of what happens. Now, I say you need to get better coaching, and that leads me to the third thing I think you have to know if you're a repeat bar taker, and that is you have to know who's on your side. Let's be really candid about this. The big box bar reviews are on your side when you're a 3L or a 4L and it's your first time taking the bar exam. Law school is on your side when you're taking the first bar exam out of school. After that, you're a pariah. They don't want to see you. They don't want to know you. They don't want to get anywhere close to you. You are a drag on their resources. You're a drag on their pass rate. You're a drag on their school's reputation. And I think most of you are probably nodding your heads right now going, yeah, I felt that too. I've spent enough time in the bar review industry, both working with a big box bar review 30 some years ago to developing and working with Celebration Bar Review for over 25 years. And in that period of time, I've seen how the big box bar reviews handle their business model. It is built around first-time bar takers. Makes sense. There's a lot of them. They're easy to spot. You can pick them out of the law schools. You can, basically buy their allegiance through 3Ls, sitting at tables, if they still do that in law schools, and signing up the 1Ls. It's a pretty good business model. And it works relatively well, less well today than it used to, but still relatively well for most people. And therefore, why change? But once you've taken the big box bar review and you've failed, whoa, it's a whole different deal, isn't it? Have you ever called one of those companies after you failed? What did you hear? Not much. There isn't much they can tell you. There isn't much they can offer you because their model isn't built for you as a repeat bar taker. Oh, I know, one or two of those companies will give you one free retake. And you can go ahead and use your one free retake, but remember, you're competing for a 20% pass rate. You don't have much chance in that circumstance. But once your one free retake is done, now what? Well, you have to go back in and buy their course that starts 8 weeks before the bar exam. There's still no personal coaching. There's still no assistance. And it's still the same approach that now has failed for you more than once. Given that, going to a big box bar review for a repeat just doesn't work. It's not what they do. It's not where they want to be. I know this because I've talked to their owners and their directors and their officers, and the fact is they don't want any part of it. They know that they're out there, the repeaters. They know that they have to deal with them, but it is not where they want to be. It's not their happy place, and it's not your happy place. And the truth is, I rarely hear from people that say, I failed and I went back to my big box bar review and they were fabulous. I mean, they were great. They knocked themselves out for me. I never hear that. Never, ever. And if that's been your experience, well, great. But I think you're a unicorn if that's happened. Now, after the big box bar reviews, and those big companies, I think we have another level that I'm just going to flat out call the scammers. There are people in the bar review industry who don't know very much about the bar exam and know less about teaching, but they know a lot about marketing. Scammers are really good at getting in and finding people who are afraid and frightened and vulnerable, and then they sucker them in. They tell them that they know exactly what to do and they know how to change it and how to make things work. But yet they don't have much of a track record. They haven't been around very long. In fact, maybe their entire reputation was built on the fact that they took a bar exam somewhere, sometime, and you don't know much more than that. They haven't worked with many people. They don't have licensed materials often. They tell you to use your big box materials, and then they charge exorbitant fees. It's not unusual to be charged $10,000 or more from some of these scammers to take their bar review mentoring or classes. And when you actually find out what that is, well, it's no unique materials. It's no proprietary materials. It's nothing unusual. It's just repackaging of what you did in law school or what you did in the big box bar review. The scammers are dangerous people. They've always been in this industry because it's a lucrative industry and they aren't going away. The barriers to entry are lower today than they've ever been. And I just want to caution you that if you think that a deal sounds too good, you ought to examine it a little more. And if someone's telling you that they can absolutely guarantee that you're going to pass the bar exam, be very skeptical of that. I've just given you the numbers. No one can guarantee that. In addition, when someone tells you that they have the pass rates, they're also not being honest with you. That's all self-reported. No one has the pass rates. In case you wondered, the bar examiners do not send their pass rates to the bar review companies at all. And if you're a one-man shop operating in a single jurisdiction, you have no idea what the pass rates are, particularly for repeat bar takers. So be very careful of those individuals. Now, are there bad things said about every bar review? Well, of course there are. There are bad things said about us. There are bad things said about Barbary and Kaplan and Themis and everybody else. That's just the reality of life today in the world that we live in. But you know, the truth is, a few companies have been around for a long time. And by a long time, I mean 20 years or more. Companies don't survive unless they're doing something right for that period of time. And so I encourage you to make sure that you're looking for that kind of a supportive company, and avoid the scammers, the people that want to just jump on and charge you a fortune. Well, where does that leave you? If the big box doesn't work and the scammers are people to avoid, I think there is a small group of what I call specialists. Companies like Celebration Bar Review specialize in repeat bar takers. It's what we do. It's what we've done very successfully for now more than a couple of decades. We focus on repeat bar takers because we know how to help them. We've developed the tools and the skills and the approach that help repeat bar takers. We recognize that for repeat bar takers, it's not only knowing the law, it's also being able to deal with their own emotional fears and the worries and the stress and the anxiety. We work with people for whom English is not a first language. We work with people who have learning disabilities. We work with people who are so beset by test anxiety that they can barely get themselves to the test site. We work with people who are not particularly good writers. We work with people who are not good formal test takers. And when you start putting that together and you take the experience of our staff and our team in working with those people over many, many years, then we have success. Now, does everyone that work with us pass? Of course not. I've just told you the statistics. But I can tell you that we consistently do better in those self-reported statistics than what the overall numbers are. And the way that we demonstrate that is by sitting down and with some of those students who are willing to talk about their stories, we interview them. And I encourage you to check out our case studies on our website, and we'll link to that. And these are great video interviews with students who've seen their scores go up by a few points, up to 60 or 70 points, in order to pass the exam as repeat bar takers. And I think it's important to hear their stories and to see what they did and how they found that doing something different made a difference for them. I think you can find a specialist if you're a repeat bar taker, and you should find a specialist. Trying to go back to a generalist is a little bit like going back to a general physician when you've got a specialized disease. You really need to go to the specialist, the person that works in that field, that understands that field and knows how to help. Sometimes the answer is as simple as changing a jurisdiction or a different strategy. Sometimes it's learning how to write more effectively, or to answer performance tests, or to handle multiple choice questions. Sometimes it's just getting a grip on the emotional trauma of taking the exam. The point is, a specialist knows what's out there, knows the tools, and knows how to apply them. A generalist doesn't know that, and of course a scammer really doesn't care. Well, that's a lot to absorb. It's a lot to think about. And I know that you might be saying, well, he doesn't talk about the fact that I've got to know the law cold, or I've got to be smarter, or I've got to work harder. And I don't say those things because my experience has been that most people that we help pass the bar know the law. They do work hard. They are intelligent and capable. They simply haven't put the tools together properly yet to pass the bar. If you feel like that's you, that you really do have the ability and the desire and the drive, and that you're not discouraged by the numbers, and you're willing to beat your competition so that you can pass the bar, and you want someone who's going to be on your side, I invite you to contact me. We'll put a link here in this video to contact me for a free consultation. We'll be glad to talk about your specific circumstance and what we can do to help you make the next bar exam your last bar exam. Well, that's our message for this week. I hope that it was useful to you. I know that some of what I had to say was probably hard to hear, and it might actually challenge some notions you have about what repeating the bar exam should be about. And I invite you, as I said, to contact me and set up your free consultation to talk about your bar studies. But I also really want to encourage you to jump on our free 90-minute online training webinar, Do Something Different, Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. As I said, you can register from the button on the show notes page, or you can go to our website at celebrationbarreview.com/webinar and register from there, and then watch at the day and time that's most convenient for you. All right, well, that's it for this week. We'll see you again next week. We'll let you know. Perhaps by next week, we'll have some results in a couple more jurisdictions. We wish everyone good luck who's waiting for their results. And for those of you that did not pass, we understand the discouragement and difficulty of that. But we also want you to know that it is possible to pass. And we look forward to helping you make that dream into a reality. So for now, we'll see you again next week along the Extra Mile.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.